Third time's the charm. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan delivered a press conference this morning just hours ahead of yet another vote for Speaker. Let's watch.
It is a great country, the greatest country in my judgment, made up of great people. And right now, those people, I think, are starting to doubt and wonder about their government and about where our nation is headed. They see an open border. They see crime in the streets. They know what it costs to put gas in their car. They know what it costs to put food on the table. They see a war in Israel, our strongest ally, Israel, and what's happening there, and the help that Israel needs. And they see a government that's been weaponized against we, the people. The very government that's supposed to serve us has been turned on the taxpayers who pay for it. I think the American people are thirsty for change. I think they are hungry for leadership. And frankly, they know that the White House can't provide it. They know the Senate won't lead. And they are looking for House Republicans to step up and lead and make change on these important issues.
Jordan further made the case that electing a speaker is imperative to get the government working again, including sending aid to Israel.
This impasse has enraged pro-Jordan supporters, not just in the halls of Congress, though. Lawmakers who have opposed the Judiciary Chairman have reportedly been on the receiving end of a pressure campaign comprised of threats and harassment. CNN obtained a vitriolic voicemail targeting one lawmaker's wife. Let's listen.
We're going to do what the left does because your of a husband gets on TV. Oh, the bad guys, they did, so I'm going to vote for Kevin McCarthy, a piece of who everybody knows. And for his piece of ass to talk about Americans who are actually fighting for Americans as the bad people, says everything about him. So you, your husband, and we're not like the left. We aren't violent, but we're going to follow your ass, every appointment you have, everything you do.
Meanwhile, Congressman Ken Buck is allegedly getting kicked out of one of his offices. Axios reporter Julie Grace Brufke posted on X that a source close to Buck told her, quote, "The landlord for one of his offices is terminating the lease, presumably because of his vote against Jordan." Jordan lost a second vote for Speaker yesterday by an even wider margin than the first vote. 22 Republicans opposed him in that second round. He also said, though, he's prepared to hold lawmakers in Washington over the weekend until a speaker is elected. And as we're taping right now, this voting is happening now on the House floor. You can see they're working on bringing everybody in to establish a quorum. Now, I would not want to be the person that's forcing members of Congress and their staff to stay in D.C. over a weekend. You know, that's the kind of thing that usually doesn't make people feel better about supporting you. But I think one of the bigger questions that we have right now is among House Republicans, if not Jim Jordan, if he can't get to that magic number, who's it going to be? You know, is Kevin McCarthy going to launch sort of a Miss Me Yet campaign to point out how it's actually very difficult to govern when you have a small majority like this that Republicans have right now? Or is it going to take somebody else? You know, and obviously Jim Jordan, there was that back and forth where he was discussing backing the plan to put in sort of this speaker light in the temporary speaker pro temp, Patrick McHenry from North Carolina. And then he rolled back on that and said, nope, we're going to push another vote on this. And it seems like he wants sort of the same kind of fight in public on the House floor that we saw with Kevin McCarthy back in January that went 15 rounds, 5 days. You know, I don't know if he has sort of the ability to do that when so many people are against him. And this is what his supporters are doing, you know, whether it's keeping people in D.C. over the weekend or having Jordan supporters calling people, sending messages like that one we just heard. You know, that doesn't seem like the kind of thing that could convince anyone to support him. And obviously Jordan has posted, you know, disavowing people like that and saying there's no place to be threatening other members of Congress simply because they think someone else should be the House Speaker. But I just don't know how, if he keeps losing votes in round after round, how long he can drag this out. You know, Kevin McCarthy eventually turned the corner and started wheeling and dealing and got people to come over to his side. But do you see that happening in this case?
I don't know, seeing this live feed on the floor of Congress where folks are talking to each other, we see, I don't know, some hand motions. It sounds like people are making their points, making their case. I don't know if they're making a passionate case for Jim Jordan, though. I will say Kevin McCarthy is probably very jealous that people like Jim Jordan enough to leave threatening messages on people's voicemails who vote against him. Kevin McCarthy went through 15 rounds and hardly enjoyed support from the public. I think the void in leadership in Congress is a big problem. We have things to do. The government is in a time of a stopgap bill. That's the only reason it's funded. We're running out of time on that. They should be budgeting, but instead they're talking about who the speaker is going to be. And I think a lot of us have the question, will anything meaningfully change when they have a new speaker? Or will we have the same kind of leadership, the same kind of policies passed as we did under Kevin McCarthy? And I think a lot of Republicans are now grappling with that, probably Matt Gaetz in particular, because Jeffries got pretty close to the threshold. There was a time when Jeffries was getting more votes than Jim Jordan. I'm sure that made a lot of Republicans nervous. And so I think the void in leadership is a big problem, and Republicans as a whole are going to take the fall for that. They're going to be blamed for that, I think, by the American people and the public if we have a government shutdown. And so I think they're kind of wasting their time. I get that everyone was upset with Kevin McCarthy's leadership, but I think there was a better way forward here than potentially going to 4 rounds of votes, 15 rounds of votes like Kevin McCarthy. They could be there over the weekend again.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is because this is happening over a weekend and nobody had really planned for having to still be fighting this right now, there's a chance that some members of Congress from both parties could actually have obligations that they end up leaving town for. And of course, in order to elect a speaker, the threshold they have to reach is just a simple majority. It's half the chamber plus one other vote in order to become the speaker. And so if, depending on which side, more people leave town, you could be in a situation where it's a wild theory, but it's not an impossibility, that Hakeem Jeffries would end up being the Speaker of the House. And so Republicans especially have to be very careful with who's out of town and making sure that they keep their numbers up before they call these rounds of votes. Because if they end up in a situation where they counted wrong or somebody got on a flight that they didn't know about, there's a chance that this could end up being even more of a political drama than it already has been. You know, obviously, people watching since just January when it was Kevin McCarthy's turn fighting for votes, and now this time around after Matt Gaetz filed that motion to vacate and ousted Kevin McCarthy, and now with Jim Jordan heading for round 3, it seems like it's as dramatic as it could get. And yet, I guess there's a possibility that this could even get more dramatic. And I would love to know how Republicans on the Hill would plan on selling that as we approach 2024 back home for why they should be reelected and why, on the national level, Republicans pitching why they deserve to be elected, if somehow they end up accidentally messing with the math enough that Hakeem Jeffries ends up as Speaker of the House. I mean, can you imagine that? That would be just one of the most entertaining situations that would make, again, the argument that Veep was a documentary, basically, about life in Washington.
That's an exciting prospect. I would love for enough members of Congress to go on vacation and that result in enough votes being not counted that the simple majority results in, I don't know, electing Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker. I don't love Hakeem Jeffries, but it would be hilarious if the Republicans shot themselves in the foot here. Would also be hilarious if that's how Jim Jordan ultimately gets in, and we have a bunch of photos of either Republicans or Democrats on vacation instead of in the halls of Congress in Capitol Hill. I think that would be unbelievably funny. And I think it would show to the American people who really cares about good governance, who really cares about representing them in Congress, and who doesn't. If that is the case, and we have members of Congress required to stay over the weekend in order to get their votes in for Speaker, and they go to a 4th round of votes, which it looks like they will be, then I would love for people to take photos of them on vacation. That would be brilliant. When Ted Cruz would run off to Mexico while there was all sorts of catastrophes going on in Texas, we had photos of him, going to Cabo in his little outfit. I would love to have all of the members of Congress that are off in Martha's Vineyard for the weekend, enjoying the fall weather, to be front page. Where were you when you were trying to elect a speaker that you didn't have? The void of leadership, I think, is much deeper than just the speakership. A lot of our members of Congress are not good leaders themselves. And I think Jim Jordan giving that speech really revealed that. He didn't sound like a leader. And I know there's a lot of people that say, well, who's better? A lot of people proposed Emmer, the whip, but I really don't think a lot of these folks have the leadership qualities that Kevin McCarthy has when it comes to seeming like a leader. He clearly did a really bad job making deals and actually delivering on it, but at least he sounded like one.
Yeah, and arguably the worst deal McCarthy made was whichever person he had to promise to lower that threshold for the motion to vacate to bring it down to just one member of Congress being able to do that, because it ultimately, even though he became the Speaker, became his undoing. I think you mentioned this earlier in this segment, but just because they've picked a Speaker does not mean that Congress then can sort of breathe a sigh of relief, especially Republicans, because we're in this continuing resolution period that prevented the government shutdown from happening at the end of September and kicked it down the road to just a few weeks from now. And so once they have a speaker, then they have to immediately return to that process of figuring out if they can put together a deal that Democrats in the Senate would approve and that President Joe Biden would sign. And obviously that didn't go well the first time, which is why we have the continuing resolution in the first place. So, you know, it's an undesirable job. And I guess maybe we should applaud Jim Jordan for at least throwing his hat in the ring to do this and getting 200 votes or 199, depending on which round you're counting, because this is just going to be a mess. You know, the speaker's vote is dramatic for sort of the symbolic and procedural reasons. But then we're right back in this mess we were in leading all the way through September once members of Congress came back from their August recess, where they couldn't agree on anything. They wouldn't, even Republicans were voting down the rules votes just needed in order to actually debate the bill before they could even pass it. And so that whole mess is going to be opened up again as soon as they have a speaker. It's not like these problems go away. And I just don't know if, no matter who the speaker is, if Republicans are actually going to be able to come together and agree on a plan and pass bills that follow the priorities that they promised the American people in the midterms that they would follow through on. And it just, I feel like the speaker vote is honestly just sort of the window dressing at this point, because it's going to get so much worse after they do elect a speaker.
Yeah, I mean, the way forward that would be the most funny is people go on vacation and that's how we get the simple majority and vote in a speaker. But I think the two better ways forward would be, one, they agree to Ro Khanna's plan. They agree that members of Congress don't trade stock. They agree that members of Congress do not take lobbying PAC funds. And they agree to some kind of term limits. I don't think it'll be 12 years as originally proposed, but some kind of term limits. Matt Gaetz said, hey, if you go forward with Ro Khanna's plan, I'll remove the motion to vacate the speakership. That's an option. I think another pretty good option, another way forward for all of the members of Congress would be for them to get together and say, we're going to do Matt Gaetz's other plan, actually, and we're going to vote for spending packages piece by piece. We're not going to lump everything together when we decide on public spending, so that if some people support defense spending, some people support more funding for SNAP, some people support cuts here, but more money there, they can't hide behind one big bill where it's all pork rolled and lumped together. Let members of Congress be held accountable for what they are voting to fund and not fund. I think that is another really good way forward. And maybe we'll get some kind of policy concession here just because our members of Congress want to go on vacation this weekend.
Accountability, what a novel idea for the people who are elected by the American people. I will say, if anybody was planning on leaving town this weekend to go to Martha's Vineyard and you're now deciding to stay in D.C. after watching what Jessica had to say about you, you should send your tickets to us and we will go in your stead and send you lots of photos. There will be more rising right after this.